It is Wednesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comproni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, we're going to talk Michigan State sports. A little bit of basketball, a little bit of football. Get ready for the last two games of the regular season for Michigan State basketball. Come on in and be kind to one another, as usual. And file in, gather around. And we're glad that you're here for another edition of Spartan Mag Live. Let me know if you can hear okay. And we'll get this thing going. Anyway, Michigan State, tough one last night, 87-70, Chrysler Arena. I'm sure a lot of you saw it. Some of you may have turned it off in anger and disgust and so forth. Tom Izzo probably would have wanted to join you in turning it off because that didn't look like Michigan State in a lot of ways. But maybe in some ways it did look like Michigan State from some of the games that we've seen this season. That's what's troubling about it, these blowouts. Blowout loss at Rutgers, blowout loss at Iowa, blowout loss at Michigan. Down by 17 at home against Illinois, came back, made that one close. Also, even Michigan State with the win was at Penn State. Michigan State was up 15 or so and let that one get away. So a lot of some severe changes in point differential. Unlike Michigan State teams in the past, in a lot of ways. We will talk about that. We'll do some film room again this week. We tried it last time, and didn't go very well. Had some technical difficulties. Had a screen freeze. You guys didn't get to enjoy some of the things we were breaking down on that day, but we'll be doing a little bit more of that today. And last week when that happened, I got a little bit of a prompt on my screen, which I'd never seen before. So if I see that again, I'll just cut it and move on. We hope to take some phone calls tonight also. Not going to have Conan Dyke tonight. We had him last night in Ann Arbor, giving him the night off. Not going to have Nils Deco either. I'm disappointed about that because I wanted to hear what he had to say about Michigan State basketball. But he went to the Houston Cougars game last night, recorded the Michigan State game. He's not watched it in time, so we won't get him. Big Mooby, I sent a bat signal out for him. Haven't heard back from him yet either. We wanted to have Jason Killip come on and talk some recruiting. He has some things he has to do as well. So we're going to turn it over, probably open up the phone lines a little bit, and we've got some material to cover. We're excited about that. Good to see everybody joining us again as we set out to talk about Michigan State football and basketball. I got to find my questions here. Should have had those handy just before we went on the air, but it was already getting late. I was already 10 minutes late. Didn't want people to wait any longer. Let me see if I can find it here. We'll get to the questions, mailbag style. If you don't know what all this stuff is, we come on here every week or so, and we take your phone calls. Well, we'll take your questions. We ask our subscribers over at SpartanMag.com to post questions, and we field those questions here, mailbag style. I'm publisher, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the Michigan State website covering the Spartans for Rivals.com. Been doing it since the mid-'90s, since the beginning of the internet, and we appreciate all the fans and the readers that we've accumulated along the way. So over at the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now for Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative on Michigan State sports, the Underground Bunker message board, and also the Final Forum basketball message board, which has been really a lot of hot takes over there, a lot of upset fans, deservedly so, a lot of people trying to find out what's going wrong with this Michigan State basketball team, when in actuality it's just living up to the preseason expectations in a roundabout way. But when they were 14-2 and playing pretty well through January 10th or so, people were expecting and seeing Michigan State as a top 10 team at that time as one of the more surprised teams in the nation. So there was a lot of hope that would continue and Michigan State would get involved in the Big Ten chase, become a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. All that went up in dust, right? So it's been disappointment, a big disappointment in that way. We will get into those things. We'll look under the hood, see what is correctable, if anything is correctable, what's going right, what's going wrong, what needs to change, what are the chances that it can change here with just a couple games left. Let's go right out of the phone calls right now. We'll open it up right now.
Call from
Kelly Spartan.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, let's go out to Detroit, Michigan. We got Kelly Spartan joining us right now. Now, Kelly Spartan, I'm going to need you to turn your computer down because you are live right now, kicking it off We're just getting started with the Spartan Mag Live, and I know that you probably have some thoughts about Michigan State basketball. 19-10 now, 10-8 in the Big Ten. Lost 6 of the last 8. A lot of Michigan State basketball fans really wondering about the direction of the program, direction of the team, and so forth. I'll turn it over to you. See what you have to say about it. Kelly, Spartan in Detroit. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Doing good, Comp. Long time no talk, man. It's been a minute.
Good to have you
but
on.
I'm glad to be able to talk to you, man. I'm feel like this is one of those situations, kind of like when, what was it, Draymond's junior year? The team had they were coming off like Final Four. Then things just went downhill. A lot of guys just seemingly quit on the team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things happened. I don't want to bring up that stuff, but this is kind of how I see it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need somebody after this season to just take the team over.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a standpoint of an attitude, it's AJ, because he always seems to, like, whenever he's in the game, he cares. You can see it. It's like it oozes off him, right? And, like, there's never been a game where we had to feel like, man, I wish AJ gave more effort. Like, you just never see. Oh, he always does it. It was like a precursor. The Kansas game, he had 18 points, and everyone was like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't expect AJ to do all that, but he constantly played. He constantly plays. Like, if he just spends all summer working on his skills, like his shooting skills and all that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, man. He's already like 6'4". He's already bigger than most guys he's going to play against. Like, he can, in certain situations, handle, like, even small forwards defensively. Like, and even think about it, like, what is it? He's 210 right now. If he hones his eyes some more, like Xavier Tillman did year after year, this dude's going to be a physical monster. He just needs a shot. But, like, I'm not going to keep harping on that. I'm just looking at how things just fell apart after those 3 guys got COVID, and it just seems like nothing ever rebounded after that. So I'm pretty sure after the end of the season, either you or Izzo is going to, like, kind of just say what was happening behind the scenes, like always happens. But, I mean, it's frustrating because, like, you see the pieces, you see that they weren't going to be, I don't think they're going to be, like, world beaters this year, but when they went on that run, like, for that win streak, whatever, I'm like, oh, these guys have something. Like, they might be able to pull it off. And then you see the mental leak start to happen. And then you see that guys start to lose confidence, and no one pulled themselves out of it. No one who should, like, the upperclassmen should have done it. And, it just reminds me of Valentine's sophomore year when those guys graduated, and he's like, all right, this is my team now. And then, like, they seemingly, like, went behind him and just worked. Now, I want to see that happen. If that happens, then next year is going to be interesting, because I do think that Gabe's class is kind of like a dark cloud over the program right now. I think that, like you had to, I think last week on one of your podcasts you did, that it might be one of the situations might be better for everyone involved if people just kind of graduated, moving on to the next phase in their life. Because, I mean, I love the guys. They're good. They're good guys. I've never heard anything bad about them. But it's just something's not clicking, man. Like, when you're seniors and you're getting less and less minutes in crunch time deep into the year, I mean, that's a bad sign. And, I mean, shoot, man, that's as much as I love Malik Hall, I mean, he's looking like that. It's like, he's not being consistent. And I don't want him, like, he's a captain. As a junior, so either he has a soul-searching summer and he figures out what he wants to be and he wants to be consistent, or one of these young guys got to take the job from him. I'm happy that going forward, I think our point guard spot is solid. Like, I think next year AJ is going to be, like, he's already efficient in terms of getting the offense going. Just like I said, the shot going. I think Max's real situation is he's still getting adjusted to the physicality. A summer in the weight room is going to fix that. I think he's going to be good. That's 1 and 2. The 3 spot, I'm not sure. I'm not sure right now what that's going to be. What happens? It's
got to be Akins.
Does Pierre? Yeah, of course. I mean, or you could slide Christie to the 3 and Akins to the 2, however you want to look at it. Or it's the wing spot really doesn't really bother me too much, because I think that most of those issues can be fixed by just guys maturing physically, because a lot of the times you would see guys do fadeaway shots at the rim when they could just extra dribble or just push their body in there. It's just nuanced stuff you learn when you're playing in college. But I don't know. I think we need I think Maddie or Marble, or maybe if Izzo can, get another guy to come in and just really, we need to, like I posted a few weeks ago, we need a goon. We need a goon down low who's going to be like, if you're going to try to score on me, I don't care about fouls. You're not scoring on me. You can score at the free throw line, but you're not scoring on me. Like, we don't have one of those guys. We need somebody who's going to be a garbage man, and like Izzo's like, you got 5 fouls, man. And I don't care how you use them. Just make sure these guys aren't like it's a mental thing. I think I said this before last year when Patrick Ewing was in Georgetown, and their coach was like, hey man, I don't care what you do, keep swatting at them. I don't care if it's goaltending, because mentally people alter their shots. Mentally, people change things about themselves when they realize it's not going to be easy, when they know they got to give up something to get that score. And not everybody's willing to do that. I mean, shoot, look at our guys. They're not willing to do that every night in, night out. We got a guy with all the tools in Malik Hall, all the tools to be an excellent player. And it just, some days you look at him like last game, you saw him during timeout, the camera was on his face and it was just deadpan. Mm-hmm. And that was just infuriating.
I don't know what's. You've covered a lot of things, and I don't disagree with any of them. Malik Hall is the one I'm having the most trouble trying to put my hand on to figure it out. You talked about they need someone to take the team over. Izzo would agree 100%. The other problems you're talking about, they're just not a physically imposing roster and lineup right now. That they thought they could address that with Matty Sissoko. He's a sophomore. He still has a lot of work to do. And Julius Marble brought him in as like a diamond in the rough type of recruit outside of the top 150. I think he's been a good, solid contributor. Prior to joining the starting lineup 2 games ago, he was really coming on strong. Since he's gone into the starting lineup, he's been okay. He admitted that he was nervous for his first start against Purdue. Ended up playing pretty well that day. But that's what you need, some enforcement from some of those guys. And Matty Sissoko comes in and gives a lot of effort. It's kind of scattered all over the place, but his head and heart are in the right place, and his musculature just got to hone in that game some more. He's just a young sophomore, but that's where a lot of it starts. They're not physically imposing. That gets back to the recruiting you're talking about a moment ago, but the leadership. And you talked about Malik Hall, the blank look on his face. Last week at this time, after Michigan State was blown out by Iowa, he was brought to the press conference before the Purdue game. He got up there at the podium and just kind of bowed his head down and spoke, and you could tell he just didn't want to be there, which I understand and I respect. I appreciate that the players take time out to come and give us some comments and some feedback about where the team stands on some things. Izzo thinks that is part of their educational process at Michigan State. But, I know they were coming off a loss, but he earlier in the year, he was a bright-eyed, very great, constructive quote, very, thoughtful. I'm sure he's a smart kid. I'm sure he has a lot of thoughts. But that light switch had really gone dim on him, even in the press conference. And, the last 4 games, the productivity has gone south. He started 2 games now. He's in the starting lineup. And you need that guy. He was one of your leaders. And in the early season practices, he was somebody that was not afraid to stand up and yell at somebody and tell people to get with it. I saw him challenge, some young players about doing things wrong. I've not seen him do that lately. I don't know what's going on there. But you're right. There's a long list of things that are not dialed up to 10. They're down around 3, 4, 2, or 1. And Malik Hall has done some good things in the past, but right now that light is kind of dim. He's got it in him, like you said. I thought he was trending toward becoming a Kenny Goings type of player. And that's like Conan Dyke was talking about last night in the VCast. If you get the best version of each of these players, and we've seen it in the past, give me the best version of Marcus Bingham, what he looked like back in December. I was just looking at his stat sheet, when they played down in Detroit against Oakland University. And I know that Oakland didn't have any big men, and it's not a Big Ten team. But Marcus Bingham that night played 26 minutes. 8 out of 10 from the floor, 12 rebounds, 17 points. On that night, Julius Marble was only playing 10 minutes. I remember feeling uncomfortable about Marble. Like, man, is he going to look to go somewhere else if he's only going to be playing 10 minutes a game with Bingham playing like this? What's going to become of Marble? A couple of days later, Bingham comes down with COVID. Nothing has been the same since. And I'm not saying he's mentally checked out, but his fuse is kind of short when things kind of go a little bit bad. He comes out of the game, and he accepted it well for a long time, but his body language is not so great either. And, Izzo, we talked about this on the message board, and that is quality control. He didn't dive on that loose ball that he had. He did a great job getting a hand on it to create a steal, and then didn't dive on it. They get a layup. And then there was one time when he was out to play defense on Diabate. Diabate took him to the rim. That's when Diabate was in as the center. Bingham came out of the game shortly after that. I don't know if he went back in, but Diabate, I'm guessing that his scouting report was to play him on the right-handed dribble. He gave up the right side. He played him to the left. Maybe the scouting report was play him to the right-handed dribble and do not get out on him at three-point range. Let him shoot. Instead, Bingham comes all the way out on him, which is what they probably didn't want, and then gave up the strong hand. So if you're a player and we are coaches and we give you a scouting report and we go over it in the film room, go over it in practice, and you go out and you don't adhere to the scouting report, you might be our best center, but we can't win when people are doing that. So that is quality control. We talk about the importance of quality control in football and basketball. That is the ugly side of quality control. It's taking someone out of the game like Marcus Bingham, a senior with so much ability, taking him out because, as Izzo says, he's not playing the right way. Now, Izzo didn't say this after the game. Izzo didn't criticize Bingham after the game. He was not asked about him, but having been around Izzo a long time, I know how he runs things and what he expects, and that's how they've hung 8 Final Four banners. It's by getting that level of quality control, unyielding quality control. And as he and Saban say, when you do have quality control, there's going to be roadkill along the way. You don't want to bench your senior March 1st in a key regular season game at the end of the year. He did that with Brandon Dawson late in his development, and it's a tough way to do it, but there's only one way that he's going to let people play, and that's it. And Sissoko was on the court because he was playing hard. Scored some points, and it's kind of awkward, but he's giving minutes to people that are playing hard. That being said, Sissoko, if he's on the court for 2 minutes, he's going to get a play wrong. Just watch him. He won't show up at the right place to set a screen, and you can just see them redirecting him. So that's a problem with Sissoko. So like Judd Heathcote used to say, you put your thumb in the dike one place and another leak spins open, and you put your thumb to fix that leak and another leak pops up. Right now, there's a lot of leaks with this team, Cali Spartan.
The thing that distresses me the most about this whole situation is that the entire year, you didn't, even when things got bad in that losing streak, you didn't hear anyone say a damn thing about players only meeting. You didn't hear anybody trying to fight anybody. It was just complete. It was just complete BS, man. Like, if Bingham's mad about losing his minutes or whatever, try to fight Matty. Make him prove it. I don't know. I like that. Like, it sounds bad, to think like that, but at least shows passion. At least shows you care. Absolutely. But like, you're just sitting stuff. If you're just like like when Brandon Dawson fought him and Payne went at each other, like, people back then thought that was bad, but then look what happened to that team. They rallied around that. Like, no one cares.
Draymond and Derek Nix went at it one time.
Yeah,
I thought Malik Hall had that in him. I saw it early in the season that he had that in him, and that's gone away, and I'm not sure why. But you're exactly right about not having that type of leadership dog, and Izzo would agree 100%. And leadership can come up in different ways. Izzo's talked about it like earlier in the season. We need some guys to step up. After that Penn State game, when Michigan State dropped that 15-point lead, Penn State came back. Nobody was stepping up to save the situation. On the court, in huddles, during huddles, on the sideline during timeouts, nobody was doing that to stop the bleeding and turn things back around. That's when you need a leader. And after that game, that's when Izzo came out and I think he might have said at one of our post-practice press conferences, he says, we're getting zero leadership right now, zero. It can come in different ways. It can come on the court huddles. We're taking people over in the locker room. It can happen in practice with people challenging people like you're talking about. It can happen also, at the point guard position. You need that in terms of the guy with the ball in his hand. And last night that was Tyson Walker. And he had open shots, and he was not taking those shots. strange shots that he was.
That's because
And
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Shots made. Remember when he got red hot against Illinois? It's like, who's this guy? And he was outstanding. And him taking that game-winning shot against Purdue, Tyson Walker after the game was like, yeah, we had Malik rolling and we had Joey popping out, but he said, I'm taking that shot. I'm taking that shot. He said it twice. Where's that guy? Where's the I'm taking that shot guy? That guy was not around last night, and he tried to push the dribble a few times and spent some energy doing that, but just kind of shied away from it and ended up with only 9 field goal attempts. This is a guy that's shooting 55% from three-point range on a team that's struggling. Max Christie took some shots that some of the fans thought might have been overzealous, overstepping his bounds, but he was at least out there trying to go get it, trying to get something, and a lot of times Christie was taking those shots after Walker had passed up some shots, and it's getting later in the shot clock. Tyson Walker needs some of that I'm going to go get it demeanor, in my opinion. And that is leadership also, ball the hand leadership. He showed that at the end of the Purdue game, but leadership all over the place, non-existent with this team. Izzo's the first one to agree with you, and it's troubling.
I mean, well, look at it. Look who was out. AJ was out. AJ was out, and it was like everything fell apart. And when I heard he was going to be out for the game, I was like, we're about to lose.
Yeah, I agree.
It's apparent.
Yeah, I'll stop you right there. And I have to ask Izzo about that off podium sometime. And he said that's one of the problems this year with the way practices are. Last year we couldn't go to practice because of COVID. And then this year, after practices, we go to the interview room, and post-practice interviews are in the press room. Whereas in the past, if you watch our videos over the years, the interviews have been on the court, on the practice court. And it's a little more casual, and you just kind of take your camera around from player to player, and you get some interviews here and there. And then after that, Kelly, Spartan, I turn the camera off, then I'm able to talk with assistant coaches, talk with players, find out what's really going on, especially the assistant coaches. I've not had a chance to talk to assistant coaches because of the way things are organized. And I'm not saying it's organized poorly. I'm just saying because of the COVID situation, still trying to go social distancing. They changed those things 5 weeks ago when Omicron was running wild. So I'm not able to get some of those extra questions in to really find out some of those things like I have in the past. But AJ Hoggard, I see that guy. I remember one time, maybe about 6-7 games ago, Mady Sissoko went into the game and did something incorrectly, and Hoggard yelled at him, right? So this is a guy that's vocal. I've seen it in practice. He is vocal. He's not afraid to hear his own voice. He's not a mouse. Tyson Walker's a little bit of a quiet mouse, understandably in some regards. Quiet guy. Charlie Bell was quiet. Andre Hudson was quiet, and that drove Izzo crazy back in 2001. But Hoggard is not afraid to hear his own voice. That's one thing. Secondly, I think he's a dynamite passer. Excellent passer. In that Purdue game, the way he was setting people up right in the shooting pocket and on time, making the read on the fly, getting it done, I think he's an excellent passer. Thirdly, he wanted to be the defensive stopper against Purdue. He wanted to guard Jaden Ivey. He according to Marble, Hoggard was saying all week, I hope they put me on Ivey. I hope they put me on Ivey. And they did. And he did a great job against Ivey. Ivey scored 15 points, but off the dribble, he's one of the hardest guys to guard in the country with his speed, good ball handling ability, and speed to the rack. And there were a couple times in that game when Hoggard moved his feet and got the trunk of his body, strength-wise, at 6'4", in between Ivey and the rim and cut him off. Man, he looked like a 6'4" version of Eric Snow playing defense on that day, and I'm talking about a sophomore. And when somebody shows that type of defense once, they've got it. And they've got the capacity to deliver that on a regular basis. So he wants to play defense. He's a good passer, and he's vocal. I don't know what he's lacking as a leader. That's why I've got to ask Izzo, what's this guy? Why can't he be a leader? I know there's some.
You know what AJ has in terms of his passing. You know how when I'm not saying he's Magic Johnson. You know how when Magic would pass the ball to somebody, the ball went from their hands to the basket. He passes in such a way that it makes guys score.
I agree.
Like that bullet pass to Walker when we were playing Purdue, and he just shot it. Like he didn't even think. He caught it, shot it.
Transition three-pointer, right?
And
he was looking for Walker, and he's serving Walker. Walker's a 55% three-point shooter. Walker doesn't have to ask for it. The ball's in his pocket right now. Yeah, he looks for Walker. He looks for those guys. I know exactly the play you're talking about, and it might have looked simple. Some people might not have even have noticed it, but excellent pass. You're exactly right. Draymond could do that a little bit also. Magic a little bit. Cassius could do it. Excellent passer, AJ Hoggard. I'm surprised by that this year. I didn't know he had that.
Well,
You know what? I didn't know he had that. But remember, at this time last year, when Lawyer wasn't working out and Rocket Watts wasn't working out, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the season, all of a sudden Hogard was starting at point guard, even though he was overweight and everything. And I hadn't seen anything in any of the games that led to any clues that he could be a point guard. And what I said here on the show is that Izzo obviously sees something. And we didn't see it for the rest of the year, what Izzo saw. But now you are seeing a little bit of what Izzo saw last year in terms of that being the quarterback. But his quarterback ability. But the leadership thing and why Hogard is not able to do that yet, I don't have a good answer on that. Go ahead.
I think it's one of those things where, like you said, last year you didn't quite see what AJ became this year as a passer. On the court, you brought up how he got on Maddie. There's bits and pieces of it coming out. Maybe, another summer when he's upperclassman at that point, he's a junior. He feels like, guys that are ahead of him, he's trying to be, maybe he's being respectful. I don't know. But in games, you see it. Like, when he's playing, he's directing traffic. He's telling guys what to do. They're feeding off his energy. I just think that, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think he's coming. And I'll bring up Zell as an example. That when in his sophomore year, I remember I was reading on Spartan Mag, or I think you're talking about, you quoted him or something, where he said, "This is my team now."
Mm-hmm. That's what you want someone to say. That's what you want someone to say.
He claimed it at the end of that season. He was like, "This is my team now." And next year they went to the Final Four. So I mean, maybe AJ has that moment and the season's over, and he's just looking at the Raptors, seeing how things didn't go the way they wanted to, and maybe we hear they have some player-only meetings next year because he's leading the team. You have to hope that
Hogard does that. You have to hope that it means that much to Hogard. I've heard there's some strain here and there with some things with Hogard, and I don't know what that might be, but you have to hope that he takes ownership of the team. You're exactly right. That's what they need, and we'll have to wait and see whether that happens. Go ahead. Keep going.
If it's not him, it's not going to be anybody. No else has exhibited any leadership skill on the team.
Yeah,
that will
it
be back next year.
It needs to be Hogard and Akins.
I think Akins can be it, but I think Akins is more.
Christie's got a little feistiness to him also. In that first Michigan game, he showed some fight in that game. I think Christie is a vocal guy in a lot of ways. Maybe Christie and Hogard, but Hogard's got to be a big piece of it.
I think AJ is the face, right? He's the guy who talks. I think Akins is the dude who hits you over the back with a steel, with a steel chair. That's the type of guy Akins is. He just does his job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Hogard is also the guy with the ball in his hands he's supposed to be. But as of last night, I've talked about this on the Huge Show earlier today and what I was looking for out of Michigan State when they went to play Michigan. And I talked about this in the VCast last night, and I'll repeat it now. And I'm sorry if I'm saying the same thing, but it's what I was thinking. After that Purdue game, Michigan State changed some things. It's very subtle, but those that watch Michigan State closely could see it. Michigan State altered the puzzle pieces. A.J. Hogard became the defensive stopper, first time in his career. Like I said earlier, he wanted to guard Ivy. And he did it well. And as a result, he played 30 minutes, career high 30 minutes. He'd never played 30 minutes. He'd never been a defensive stopper. He did well as a stopper. And that's against Ivy. So I'm like, you project that to different opponents. Okay, what does it look like next time you play Wisconsin? If he guards Johnny Davis, what does that look like? And I know Johnny Davis can get his shot against anybody. He's outstanding. But against other teams, what would it look like if he guarded Eli Brooks last night, if he'd been healthy? When you have a set defensive stopper they haven't had all year, it kind of just sets the rotation a little bit. It changes things. Earlier in the year, or for the first 25 games of the year, Max Christie was tasked with being the quote-unquote defensive stopper. Even though he's not a stopper, he was the guy guarding the other team's best player. And he did that well earlier in the season against some opponents. But as the season went along, that became more and more difficult. He kept giving a lot of effort, but then his offense faded on him. He went in that slump, and then the transition game for the entire team goes away. So Michigan State's transition game suffers, and Michigan State's perimeter shooting, both Gabe Brown and Max Christie, under 20% for that stretch of 6 or 7 games. So they look at it like, are we asking Christie to do too much? He's hitting the freshman wall. He's playing 32 minutes a game. We're tasking him with guarding Johnny Davis and everybody else's best perimeter player, as long as it's not a 6'1" or smaller point guard. So they took Christie off of the defensive stopper role, put Hogard on it. Hogard was very good, and Christie played well that game also against Purdue. And what do you know? The fast break looked better also, and the perimeter shooting was better. All those things are dominoes that can change when you're not asking your freshman would-be scorer to be a defensive stopper. So that was the little change of the puzzle pieces. All of a sudden, coming out of that Purdue game, I was like, all right, this is different. They've reassembled the puzzle here a little bit. And Izzo's had some changes late in seasons that have had, exponential positives in terms of the impact. Usually it's around mid-February. It's not late February. And I've talked about that before, what they did with Allen Anderson, Chris Hill, Neitzel, and all that stuff. So this was
let me say two things, and I'm going to get off the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first thing is, if I'm making a declaration, if AJ is healthy, and everyone's healthy, and AJ's running the point, they'll make it past the first weekend.
Mm-hmm.
My second thing I want to say is the question I'm going to hang up because I want you to answer. Can you tell us, or maybe in a slide way or however you want to do it, how many people is looking at to get from out the transfer portal?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, hold on a second. Don't go anywhere yet. Are you still there? Do you have to go, or can you?
Yeah. I was trying to get someone else to turn. I mean, I felt bad. Right. I was reading the comments.
No, it's fine. The Hogard thing. You're saying look, get past the first weekend if he's healthy and playing well. I would not disagree with that. That's what I was dying to see last night. I wanted more inventory to pull from as an observer of this team. I wanted to see what it looked like, AP after Purdue. It happened once. I wanted to see if they could do it away from home. I wanted to see, is this going to be the new rotation where Hogard plays 30 minutes? And if he plays 30 minutes, that doesn't mean the other 10 at point guard go to Tyson Walker. You still need Tyson Walker to play 20, right? So if Hogard's playing 30, and your defensive stopper has to play 30. Your defensive stopper can't play 20 and be a single platoon at point guard. You need your defensive stopper out there for 30 minutes because the guy he's stopping is going to be out there for at least 30 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So if he plays 30, you can't just have Tyson Walker play 10. 30 plus 10 is 40 minutes at the point guard position. Tyson Walker's got to get minutes elsewhere, right? He's got to play his 20, 25 minutes. So if he plays 20, that means he's 10 at backup point guard and then 10 minutes as a wing on the court with Hogard. I think that was that's what they did against Purdue, maybe 22 minutes. Now that takes minutes away from Brooks and Akins, and maybe a little bit from Brown and Christie too. But that's what they have to do. I thought that coming out of the Purdue game, maybe that's the direction they were going in. I wanted to see it then at Michigan. Do they stick with that? Also with Hogard and Walker playing on the court together as point guards, Michigan State, the coaching staff, put that into the rotation, into the script, to have both point guards on the court there like at the 7-minute mark. It was clear they did it twice in the first half and again in the second half. They wrote it into the script. Whereas in the Illinois game, when Tyson Walker became hot, it was almost it just kind of organically happened during the course of the game where the 2 point guards were on the court at the same time. They said they hadn't practiced it a lot. They hadn't planned to do that. It's just something that happened. Then after that game, then the Iowa game happened. Then after that, they said, okay, we are going to that. We're going to script that in. You saw it against Purdue. That was game one. Now I wanted to see what had happened after the Purdue game. Went to Michigan, and Hogard's not available. Doesn't start. Walker goes back to the starting lineup. He didn't look as comfortable doing that. Hogard comes in, plays 11 minutes in the first half. He's not himself. He missed that one layup. He got caught not stopping ball in transition on one occasion. Got caught on a high ball screen away where he just didn't move his feet quick enough. He's battling like a tonsillitis strep throat thing going on. And you can tell he didn't have the energy. Nothing against him at all. He tried. But with him playing fewer minutes and Walker playing more, Walker, he wasn't quite himself either. And the whole thing they're flat tires all over the place for Michigan State. I don't mean being tired. That just knocked them out of kilter, and all of a sudden they were the same team that lost at Rutgers, basically. So I wanted to see what it looked like just to have an idea of what they could look like going into the tournaments. This is what I said in the VCast last night. If Michigan State had come out in that game and Michigan had played well and Michigan made their shots and Michigan won the game by 4 or 5 points, but Hogard was the defensive stopper and played well, played 30 minutes, and Walker and that played 20, and they looked good together, and Michigan State had the transition game going, and things were good, and they just got beat by a good team on the road. I'd have been like, okay, we've seen it twice now. They can make progress from there. Instead, didn't get to see him play. Instead, leadership, when that thing was going haywire, again, a lot of blank faces. So when Izzo came to the postgame press conference, he was down. I mean, he was down. Or I don't know if he was down. Well, he's disappointed. Just lost his rivalry by double digits. But he was quiet. He was quiet. I don't know if the exchanges with who's the big man for Michigan? Dickinson. I don't know if the exchanges with him were something he didn't want to talk about or was concerned that would be asked about. I didn't see it when it happened live, so it didn't really come up. But he was quiet. Izzo was very quiet. A different type of quiet, almost like like he's been asking for the light to go on with some of these guys, leadership wise, passion wise, and he keeps having to repeat himself. And above all, he always talks about it's important for a team to be a player-coach team instead of a coach-coach team. But here he is in game 29 having to be the guy that's telling players what to do when he wishes there was a leader out there getting guys to do it right. Instead, he has to keep asking, and they keep getting it wrong. Ball screen defense, ball screen defensive assignments. I've got that in the film room for later in the show. Just basic stuff. These are November errors, and they're happening on March 1st. And Izzo is, I don't want to say he's done with it. I'm not going to say he's at his wit's end. He's just very disappointed that they're still spinning their wheels in this regard.
I mean, yeah, man. I mean, to get back to what you're saying about Christie and the guys running offense and Tyson Walker not being comfortable. AJ, I'm saying, man, AJ, if he's healthy, in the next couple of days, we'll see how things go in the next week or two. But they just stay healthy because he runs the offense like he's like I want to say he sees the floor. He just you know what? It's instinctual. Like I don't think AJ's thinking out there. Mm-hmm. I think he's just passing the ball. He's like he sees someone open, pass the ball.
He has a feel.
There it is. He has a feel for it. And what you said about him playing Purdue against like defensive stopper against Ivy, Max, like your players who are your main scorers should not be your best defenders.
Right.
You want them using most of their energy for scoring. Mm-hmm. AJ she's not a big time shooter yet or anything. Mm-hmm. He gets his points, fast break, bullying a smaller point guard. He gets it how he lives. That's fine. But he's not trying to get his points. He's trying to get everyone involved. That's not what Tyson Walker's game is. Tyson Walker is a shooting guard. He has good handles, but he's a shooting guard. He's not a natural passer.
You're right.
And
I think
when AJ's out there,
I think they can complement each other really well. And if Hogard becomes a 30-minute-a-game guy, if Hogard has to sit for 10 minutes, I think Tyson can take it over for 5 minutes a half, like Charlie Bell used to back in 2000. You know what I mean? I agree. Tyson Walker is built like a point guard, but he's not even a lead guard. He's just a guy with good ball handling ability that's a shooter. He's a combo guard. A lot of people don't like that term. He's a combo guard, right? That's good. That's useful. And when he's out there with Hogard,
I'll say this,
the way Hogard sets him up and the way those two like each other, they remind me of some of those backcourts you used to see in the past, like for Villanova or Xavier, just a couple of guys that just give it back and forth and shoot. And if Hogard ever develops a jump shot, I mean, he's excellent because with the way he showed that he can play defense, short sample size against Purdue. But if you can do it once, as a defensive player, there's no faking that. I mean, like I said, some dude can come out and make 5 3-pointers in a game, and sometimes that happens. But in terms of being that type of foot quickness and trunk quickness against Jaden Ivey, you can't just, get lucky doing that. There's not many people that can do that. He can play defense like that, and he's got that feel as a passer. Combining those two, that is uncommon. It's uncommon. And Hogard's just kind of getting his game together in that regard. That part of it is kind of exciting, but it's also frustrating. Go ahead.
You remember that part of the game, I think it was the second half, where half the team was they was fast breaking, and half of U of M's team went to the basket, and then Tyson Walker crept out, and he had maybe 2 seconds to shoot the three, and he didn't. Mm-hmm. If AJ was the one running the offense, and he had ran down there, he would have passed him the ball, he would have shot it. It's no thinking when AJ's out there. When AJ's passing you the ball.
Tyson was not himself last night, man. He crawled back into a hole a little bit, And he was asked last night about passing up shots, and he kind of disagreed. And he said, "I took 9 shots. That's more than I usually take." I think he said I took more than I ever had before, which is not true. He's taken 11 shots in the past against Illinois, but I think he kind of bristled at the question a little bit. But a lot of us observers and people in the media and fans were like, "Man, that shot is there. We've seen him take it and make it, and we've seen that particular shot window give Michigan problems. It gave them problems against the Illini last weekend. It gave them problems with Michigan State the first time they played in January, except it was Hogard on a rescreen drive was giving them problems this year. Last year, Rocket Watts getting into that window against Dickinson, the way he plays drop coverage on ball screens. And Michigan is good. I think Michigan's got the ability to win the Big Ten tournament. I hate to say that for Michigan State fans, but they'll be bringing Juwan Howard back. He'll be coming back like a martyr or something. They'll make a big deal out of that. That'll give their players a boost. I could see Michigan. I don't know what the bracket's going to be, but I could see Michigan versus Wisconsin rematch at some point in the Big Ten tournament. And I think they could be a Sweet 16 team until and unless they play a team that can take advantage of that weakness, that ball screen pull-up jumper, either from 3 if they're going under the screen or that just snaking it to the elbow area. But Michigan's pretty good, but Tyson Walker just kind of like shied away from it last night, man. And I got a lot of respect for him as a player and a competitor. He's got excellent skill and talent. That was just curious. Anything else?
Oh man, I'm about to wind down, dude. Thanks for letting me talk to you. I'm excited to watch the rest of the show.
All right, I know that you probably brought up a lot of things that a lot of listeners and viewers agree with, and we appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. Thanks a lot, Callie. Appreciate it.
Don't forget to answer my question though about how many people you think Izzo's going to bring in on the from the portal though.
Well, let's see. They don't think a lot. They don't seem to be very busy for freshmen for next year. They've got Kohler coming in, and they've got Trey Holloman. And Holloman, one of the things Izzo likes about Holloman is that football background, that toughness, and he's got some flair to him and some passing ability. Not a complete guard because the shooting gets erratic there a little bit, but some that defensive toughness. I've not watched any of their full games. I need to go online and see if I can find a full game of theirs to see what he looks like in terms of being a leader on the court. I went to watch him last year at one of the tournaments, was at Spiece, but he was playing off Broadway somewhere, and I didn't get to see him. And they were done, and I didn't get a chance to watch him. But I wanted to just see the leadership aspect of it. Izzo's caught without leadership this year. He looks for leadership on the recruiting trail every year, and it's hard to find. Wisconsin has it with Davison, and Illinois has it with Frazier, a couple of 5th and 6th year guys. It's valuable. He looks for it, and it's in short supply these days, as are point guards in general. You listen to some of the national podcasts, and they always talk about the shortage of point guards. Gonzaga has one. Kentucky's got one or two. Villanova's got one with Gillespie. Just look around the Big Ten in terms of natural point guards. Purdue doesn't really have one. Hepburn played real well last night for Wisconsin. He's come along more than I thought. I thought he was a little bit overweight. I thought he was a little chunky earlier in the year. He's done a good job. He's a good on-ball defender also. But in terms of pure point guards, there's a shortage of those guys. And finding a point guard who's also a leader, that's really hard to find. Let's go to the mailbag anyway. Thanks for joining us. If you're just joining us right now, my name is Jimmy Comparoni, SpartanMag.com, publisher. We ask Michigan State fans over at the SpartanMag.com Underground Bunker message board. I put up a post earlier today. Hey, it's Spartan Mag Live tonight. Come on in, ask any questions. We'll answer those questions mailbag style starting right now. Question number 1, MSU Polo from Rockford, Michigan. Me and Polo, we're going back and forth in the bunker a little bit today. That was fun. Got a lot of respect for Polo. Good to have him in the community. He says, hey, Jim, quick question. If you anticipate any current Michigan State basketball players transferring, he says, we've been debating this on the Final Forum today, Wednesday, and he said, and in combination with your comments yesterday about the 3 seniors and your comment last week about the staff's plans to look to add from the portal, it seems like there could be some roster churning this offseason. Portal, I've got to ask again about the portal, because they do have scholarship slots open, and you look at what Kentucky's done at the portal and what Auburn's done in the portal. No question, teams have made a move, have helped themselves doing that. Michigan State got aggressive with it with Tyson Walker, but as far as you go on with your question here, it says in combination with comments yesterday Okay, the churning for this year. All right, in terms of the roster movement, last year we kind of figured Foster Lawyer might be moving on and Thomas Kithier moving on because Michigan State had too many big men and they needed one to move on. Made sense for Kithier to move on. We were not surprised in the past that Javon Best moved on. I was surprised when Marvin Clark moved on, and those were deals where Michigan State kind of suggested that they'd be better finding some playing time elsewhere. Russell Byrd, no one was surprised when he moved on. Just looking into the past. A couple of guys that aren't young guys that are not getting much playing time. You'd look at Madi Sissoko and Pierre Brooks. And the way Izzo is talking those guys up in press conferences makes it clear that Izzo wants to keep those guys. And in this day and age of the transfer portal reality, you've got to fluff those pillows and keep those guys, make them feel wanted and part of it. Like you said about Sissoko a few days ago when he played real well in that Purdue game, Izzo said, man, he's going to be a great player. He just needs to stick with us. Do you remember when he said that? He just needs to stick with us. Izzo's doing portal defense, which coaches don't want to have to do, but they don't want those guys to leave. A.J. Hoggard, Malik Hall, I don't think they'd be leaving, but man, you never know. You just don't know. And like I said, there's some strain here with some people here and there, but I think Hoggard has a future. And in terms of people going out, I've not done the math in terms of scholarships and who's available and how much room they would have if players leave and so forth. I'm not really sure. And those things, roster management, Izzo used to say that scheduling was one of the hardest things in the coaching profession. Now roster management, not knowing, you got to find out what's in each player's minds and in their hearts, who's back on the team next year. It's almost like AAU or something. I don't know, but it's a good question, but I don't have any further insight on a number that they would be looking at. I wouldn't doubt them going out and getting one, maybe. One player, but it depends on who's not coming back. And if you talk to them about it right now, in the back room, they might talk about it a little bit, but just the way they are, stroking Brooks and Sissoko, that in itself is work toward next year, believe it or not. Question number 2, King in the North from East Lansing, Michigan, wants to talk football. He says, do you see Michigan State's defensive line? How do I see Michigan State's defensive line situation panning out for next year? And he says, any chance Michigan State manufactures some depth on the defensive line by going with more three-man fronts, especially with influx of linebacker transfer talent? He says, any chance a defensive tackle like Simeon Barrow gets some snaps at defensive end against heavier formations? Do I expect Brule or Windman to play some defensive end? He says, do I expect Tank Brown to be a major contributor? Oh, a lot of good questions there. Tank Brown, yeah, what did he play? About 30 snaps this year, played on special teams a little bit. I think he had a little bit of an ailment halfway through the season. They like his pass rush ability. I would think that, yeah, they brought him in last year out of the portal. He'll be someone to watch this spring, someone they need to see something out of. I think Tank Brown is in that category. Playing more of a three-down lineman with a linebacker standing up. I mean, you can do that maybe in a pass situation, but the more you do that, if you have a stand-up linebacker out there in the defensive end position, if you're not playing a true Okie defense with, a middle guard and heavy defensive ends out there, the 5 technique, and instead, if you've got an outside linebacker playing a 5, if he's standing up, he better be able to take on a double team if they trade the tight end over there. And increasingly, Michigan had some success playing with more physicality in the run game. And I think Michigan's going to be doing more of that. So you can't be caught light in the pants there. But you're asking more three-down linemen. I think you'll see defensive end standing up. I think Chris Bogle coming in from Florida is going to be a stand-up defensive end type of guy, if you want to call him a linebacker. But he'll be playing a defensive end in terms of gap control, gap assignment. It'll be like a defensive end, but he's standing up. Can he take that on when it's a run play right at him? We're going to learn some more about that this spring probably. But the stand-up defensive end, Pietrowski can probably stand up a little bit. Bogle can stand up. Brule, possibly. I think Windman is more of a stack linebacker guy. I'll have to go back and look at his UNLV film again. I had some notes on him, but I can't remember what I wrote. But I think he's a stack linebacker. So more three defensive linemen. I don't know, but defensive end is a question mark. I agree with that. When you look at defensive end, there's not a lot of them roaming around. I know we'll talk. I think there's another question about that coming up about transfer portal defensive ends, but they're gonna have to manufacture something in order to get. Panashuk was kind of hot and cold. Willikis was great before these guys came aboard as coaches. Did some good things. Beasley was functional last year, certainly. But I don't know, that defensive end from Tennessee lasted a year. Anyway, you're asking, how do I see the defensive line situation panning out? You've got Bogle and Tank Brown, or defensive end, Pietrowski. Brandon Wright did some things at the end of the season with his ability to track things from the backside, showed some straight line speed. Might have a little bit of turn the corner to him. Can he take another step? It's a good question. A lot of people that look into defensive ends on the recruiting trail, they like to see guys that have some running back in their background, and Brandon Wright certainly has that. As far as Simeon Barrow moving out to defensive end, I don't see that. Not in the way Michigan State does things currently. If Michigan State wanted to go to a true 3-4, an Okie defense with a middle guard and heavy defensive ends out there, then outside linebackers standing up as your pass rushers, then Barrow could do that, kind of like what Will Golson's doing in the NFL. But I don't think they're doing that. Good question. Going to be checking that out this spring, and they're going to continue to try to add to it. Question number 3, Solo Beer Guy from Westland, Michigan. He says, early spring game football question. Who are 3 football players that you will be keenly watching in this year's spring game? 3 players. Just mentioned defensive ends. I mean, Chris Bokel's got to be one. The guy coming in from Florida. What does he look like? 6'4". I think he's about 260, athletic. Was waiting his turn down in Florida. And then someone that he thought was going to be moving on to the pro ranks stayed, and he was looking to go elsewhere to get some playing time, get some run. Bogle's the guy. I'll be watching. It's going to be interesting. We'll keep our ear to the ground to hear what we're hearing about him during spring practice when that begins in, let's see, when does that start? I'm sure some of you already know, but here I am. Dead air, just because I got to find out. Where is it? Wait a minute. I went to the wrong place. Right there. March 15th. The Ides of March, that's when it starts. So 13 days until spring practice begins. They just finished, STP is Tuesday, was their 7th STP, 7-week period. That was the last one. And what'd they do? Here we go. What was that? These guys. These guys were declared spring training program champions, ending the 7-week period on Tuesday. Every Tuesday they do STPs, Spartan Training Program. STPs, they were borrowing that acronym from the old oil treatment, gas treatment, STP. You guys might remember that in the 43 car, Petty Enterprises, if you know what I'm talking about. STP. So Harold Joyner was the champion there at the running backs position. And Cade McDonald among wide receivers, Van Summeren among defensive linemen. He's a workout type of guy. Or he was overall defensive MVP. And then Jacob Slade among interior linemen. And Justin White, White just keeps showing up as a walk-on corner. Just keeps showing up as a guy that's got a lot of motor and a lot of want to. And Shorefar, the walk-on quarterback from DeWitt, was the tight ends, quarterbacks, and specialist choice. So congratulations to those guys as STPs finish as they head towards spring practice March 5th. So who else am I going to be looking at in spring practice? Defensive ends, Chris Bogle. Also, I want to look at Darius Snow. Is he a safety? Is he a nickel? Or even a linebacker? So I want to see what they're going to do with Darius Snow. I thought that he did some really good things last year, and they've got to try to figure out where to use him, number 23. Is he 23 or 13? Same number as his dad. Is he 13? 23? Can't remember. Doesn't matter. I want to look at Ronald Williams. I thought he did a good job at the corner position as the season went along, but he's a guy with a big frame. Can he play with some strength at the safety position? Will he be at corner, or is there a chance he might be moving to a different position? I've not heard anything with him, but seems like on paper they're lacking some safeties. Is Darius Snow, is he quite what they want speed-wise back there? Not sure. And also, how do the linebackers shake out? You're bringing in Aaron Brule from Mississippi State. Corvaris Crouch is still around. Jacoby Windman coming in from UNLV. Good, solid guy. Brule was a little bit of a disappointment last year for Mississippi State. He was supposed to be the face of the defense. Didn't quite work out, and then lost some playing time later in the year. I think he can get in better shape. I think he will be in better shape here. He'll be nicely motivated. Would expect him to start living up to that 4-star status. I think it's possible. But you have Cal Halliday coming back as a former starter. You got Halliday and Crouch. You got Windman and Brule coming in. How does that linebacker thing shake out? Does Darius Snow sneak in there a little bit? I don't know. He can hit. So linebacker thing, that's what I'll be looking at. Bogle, how does the linebacker thing shake out? Defense, right? Question number 4, Bill from Byron Center, then I'll go over here to the chat area. Bill from Byron Center says, regarding Brian Green yesterday, he visited yesterday. He said, any word on how his visit went? Brian Green, the center from Washington State in the portal. He's still in school at Washington State, still working on his second degree over there. And he'll be graduating in May and enrolling somewhere in mid-May. And Michigan State's right in there with him. Michigan State's got a solid shot. Let's see, that's him right there. Let me reduce that. We talked about him last week. Center position, pretty good one. Nick Samac is also around at the center position. Green can play some guard also, but, Samac played a lot as a young freshman, played a little bit last year, and some this year, never quite overtook Matt Allen. Played against Pittsburgh in the bowl game and was just kind of okay. They need better than okay, or they at least need some competition there. Samac is kind of leveled off. Needs to take it back up. If you can't get it done, maybe Brian Green can. But Brian Green, as we record this, is still on campus. So there's no word on how that visit went. And the question is, do we expect to hear from him afterwards? Sometimes guys come in for portal visits, and once in a while they will do interviews with recruiting reporters before they visit. And then after the visit, a lot of times they go quiet. Would not be surprised if that happens with him also. He could visit some other places as well. But Michigan State seems to want him. Brian Green on campus right now. And the question is also, please share your thoughts on where the staff priorities are for the last 2 spots. Talking about portal spots. It seems to me that if Green commits quickly, that leaves 1 spot for 2 positions of need. This is from the questioner, Bill from Byron Center. And he asks, which position is the staff most seriously pursuing? Well, Green at center, and maybe 1 more offensive tackle. As far as defense goes, defensive end would be one also. There was a question earlier. Let's see if I can find this question. Someone asked about defensive end recruiting in the portal. I'm trying to look for that question. I'll come back and look for that question in a moment, but let's go over here to the chat area. Got Old Tuck coming in first. Eric M., Mark Carrier, Brad Fashenko from Austin, Texas. Old Tuck asking, is Jackson Kohler the next Tom Herzog for Michigan State? Nothing against Zogger, but no, they're hoping Kohler's much different. Herzog, everybody remembers Herzog. He was maybe lesser version of Marcus Bingham, actually. Kohler is more of skilled. He's got some suit on. Got a little Zach Randolph in him with some face-up. Kohler's a different type of guy. A guy that'll score. We'll see how he does here. And then Will Hoffman, your thoughts on our loss to Michigan. Well, we talked about that a few minutes ago, but the starting lineup got Old Tuck in the middle. Eric M. running the point. Mark Carrier. I liked what he did for the Lions back in the day. He's the stretch 4. Fashenko is the 2-guard. Will Hoffman is a wing guard. Mr. Bowman says hello. Gordon Sonona saying hello. Mr. Bowman said, this team has no guts at all. Never seen anything like this from under a Tom Izzo team. Tom Izzo might agree with you. Callie Spartan compared it to that team when Draymond was a junior that lost 15 games, lost to UCLA in the first round, down in Florida in the tournament. It was preseason top 10. That team had some dysfunctional aspects to it, but no guts. You know, it's an interesting way to say it because they've shown it at times. The game at home against Indiana, the game at home against Michigan, the game at home against Purdue. When they've got the Michigan State fans behind them, you see them unite and show a little different octane level. They go on the road, they don't have it. And I don't know if I've seen a Michigan State team that is as night and day different as this team is in terms of home and road, especially those Tuesday night road games. Blowout loss at Iowa, blowout loss at Michigan. The blowout loss against Rutgers was a Saturday, but the point remains. Away from home, they're a quiet team. Things start to go bad, they got no stoppers there. That's how they lost that 15-point lead against Penn State. It is strange. It's not a Tom Izzo coach team. Doesn't look like one. You're exactly right. Old Tug says, where does Brian Musalam fit into the picture? He's with Mel and Stray a lot. Is he working name, image, and likeness deals for Michigan State? I don't think so. I saw Strayhorn last night at the game, talked to him for a moment. I didn't talk to Musalam. He was out. He was busy doing something, but I don't know what he does in an official capacity. I'm sure he's trying to help in some ways, but I don't know if he's doing anything like that or not. Good question. Tyler Miller says there's no leadership from the seniors. Brown and Bingham show no voices. I agree with that. Brown is a hype man. He builds up his teammates, but can he clamp down on his teammates? No. Can he get a huddle going and get people going? You know, in terms of correcting people, no. Bingham, he gets fired up when things are going well. He's a well-liked guy. Got a lot of energy in that regard, but, you know, not showing that he can take coaching and apply what's being emphasized. And like Izzo says, players determine their own playing time. And there's no way to reduce your playing time more than to not do what Izzo's emphasizing. And it's too bad because they need the Marcus Bingham that played against Oakland. I know, against a weaker team who scored 17 points and had 12 rebounds and played 26 minutes. They need that Marcus Bingham if they can find him. They need the A.J. Hoggard who passed the ball against Michigan, who played defense against Purdue, passed the ball against Purdue. They need that A.J. Hoggard. They need the Max Christie in transition like he was against Purdue when he didn't have to play a defensive stopper. They need the Gabe Brown that played against Purdue. Gabe Brown shot pretty well last night. They need that Gabe Brown. You know what Malik Hall they need, the guy that can score 17 points. And I realize not everybody can score 17 points because if you have 10 guys scoring 17 points, that's 170 points. That's not possible. I know that you cannot have that every single night. But all those guys have done it on occasion. They've shown what they can be. But too often they're not stapled together. And that's what Izzo's trying to get figured out. Brad Vashenko asks, does Malik Hall transfer? Did not look happy against Michigan or at Michigan. Does he transfer? You know, Callie Spartan was wondering about that. I don't know what's going on with Malik Hall. I know that Izzo's been calling on people to be better leaders, and that is somebody who had the leadership tag and the leadership capability, so we can assume behind the scenes that Izzo's really trying to get into Malik Hall to get leadership out of him, to push him to become something he's not comfortable doing. Maybe that's had some negative repercussions in the short term. Will it remain that way? I'm not sure. Did that happen at all? I don't know, but he does not look happy, and he's been sullen and quiet. I use the word sullen. Izzo was asked about it. Remember the game when they lost at Penn State? Was it Penn State or where was it? Was it the Maryland game? When Izzo didn't open up the locker room for interviews. And Izzo came back a couple days later and said the reason he didn't is because it was a sullen, that was the word he used, sullen environment in the locker room. Down. That sullen means down, despondent, right? And I'm not sure Malik Hall's been bright-eyed and bushy-tailed since. He started. He was put into the starting lineup against Purdue. They won that game. I think that he was put into that starting lineup as much as anything because Marble was going in because Bingham was coming out. And Marble's tag team partner most of the year has been Hall. Marble and Hall have played a lot together. Bingham and Hauser have played a lot together. So I think that was kind of a platoon start. Do they need to maybe... They've tried other things. I'm sure that, they've tried different playing groups and they've got the numbers and broken it down more than I have. Might we want to see Marble and Hauser playing together more just to see what it looked like? If they had more games to play, I think they might like to experiment with that, but can't experiment too much. Not many games left, and these guys are getting tired here. 3 games in 7 days coming up. But you're right, Malik Hall doesn't look right. Old Tuck says, 8 players averaging 6 points per game. That's too many shots for too many guys. Who is Michigan State's rebounder? Who's our distributor? Who's our screener? They all want to score. Good point. Distributors, A.J. Hoggard, I think he looks to pass. Rebounder, in terms of rebounding, Michigan State's number 7 in the Big Ten in rebounding margin. Number 7 in the Big Ten in rebounding margin in Big Ten games. That's got to be among the worst showings of the Izzo era. For the season in Big Ten games, they are not even a +1. They're like a plus +0.08 or something. Why? That gets back to toughness. That gets back to being a player, to not being a player coach team. They're not holding each other. There's no one to hold them accountable in rebounding. It just comes down to just straight ability. Bingham is their best rebounder. He leads the team in rebounding at 5.8 rebounds a game. He's averaging 18 minutes a game. So now he's only playing 9 or 10 minutes a game because he's trying to work his way out of the doghouse. So if your best rebounder is only playing 10 minutes a game, where are you going to pick up the slack on that? It's not like it was a great rebounding team to begin with. So Bingham is your best rebounder. He's not playing. Hauser, 5.4 rebounds a game, not bad. Malik Hall, 4.8 rebounds a game, not bad. So that's about 9 or 10 rebounds per game for the stretch 4 position. Not bad. Not terrible. Do either of those guys ever come forward with one of those 15 rebound games like Kenny Goins or Draymond Green? No. Gabe Brown, 4 rebounds a game. Not bad, but at 6'8", you'd expect him to be a little better than that. But not bad. Marble, 3.6 rebounds a game, averaging 15 minutes a game. Not quite good enough for the minutes he's playing at the center position right now. Christie, 3.4 rebounds a game. He goes in there once in a while and gets a good one. Now, the opponents are really still trying to focus on blocking Michigan State out because that's how you beat Michigan State. That's one of the things you need to do, even with a poor rebounding team as Michigan State is this year. So that's a Jimmy's and Joe's thing as far as the rebounding goes. But good question from Old Tuck. Old Tuck says, we have a bunch of guys who all think they are the scorers first. That boat don't float. I don't think Tyson Walker thinks of himself as a scorer first, and he probably should. Even Hauser's passed up some shots here and there. Malik Hall, is he passing up shots once in a while? Face up? Maybe so. So I'm not sure I agree with that, Old Tuck, as much as I respect your style. Let's go back here to the mailbag. Question number 5, Amos from Perrysburg, Ohio. Basketball again. He says, where's the disconnect with this year in terms of defensive rebounding? It just seems this year we are not doing any boxing out. I mentioned that a second ago about the numbers. He says, doesn't seem we're doing any boxing out, identifying the positions on the floor to get rebounds. He says, when we do get our hands on the ball, holding on to it is a problem. He says, I know Izzo's preaching it, but why is it not getting better? Why is it not getting through to the choir? I just talked about Marble and Bingham. I just went over the rebounding numbers. And also, Michigan State's transition game is not scaring anybody. A lot of times Michigan State would clear the defensive glass because opponents were so preoccupied with getting back in transition defense that they weren't going to the offensive boards. This year, you're seeing more opposing teams go to the offensive boards against Michigan State than maybe ever before in the Izzo era. Going back to when Wisconsin, or was it Northwestern, got 17 offensive rebounds when they beat Michigan State at Breslin about a month ago. And Michigan's had success on the offensive glass. Last night, I think Michigan State was 16 of the first 24, red hot. Only missed 8 shots out of the first 24. And out of those 8 missed shots, they got offensive rebounds on 3 of those 8. And they scored on all 3 of those 8 second chance opportunities. So you're talking about a team taking 24 shots. Well, 21 shots when you take away the second chance shots. So 21 shots, only 3 times out of 21 did they miss and not get the rebound. Is my math right on that? 18 out of 21 times they either scored or got the rebound and scored. Out of their first 21 shots, only 3 times did they come away empty. Michigan last night. They played well. And they get hot like that. They did that against Purdue. I'm not going to say they shot out of their gourd because they have shot like that in other games. Michigan State chose that game to have some breakdowns in terms of allowing dribble drives because ball screen defense went haywire. It's like Michigan State was getting punked, getting beaten, and they started looking around like, uh-oh, this is not going good. And then they all kind of lost their assignments. Instead of staying on task and just, easy for me to say, up at the crowd with a hot dog and hot chocolate. But we've seen Michigan State teams in the past, in past Izzo years, if they do get behind by 12, 14, 15, you know Michigan State's, that Izzo's going to stay on them and a Michigan State run is coming. And Michigan State did have a run last night, cut it to 11. But letting it get out of hand in the first place, I thought Marble, Conan Dyke disagreed with me last night during the VCast, but I thought Marble was kind of feeling embarrassed a little bit. Not only was Dickinson embarrassing Michigan State, I think Marble was kind of feeling embarrassed. And you had a lot of Michigan State guys with their tail between the legs a little bit. Talked about Malik Hall on the bench, Brooke Trout look, a lot of that going on last night. So are they starting to feel bad about themselves? Not a good thing. So it's going to be on Izzo to spruce them back up. But Izzo, he hates being the leader. He don't want to be the leader. He wants a player-coach team. He wants a couple of players to take that over. It's not happening. There's no pixie dust to make that happen. Question number 6. Alan from the East Bay on Houghton Lake says, is it the Jimmies and Joes or the X's and O's? Wherein lies the problems as you see them with Michigan State basketball? It's the Jimmies and Joes. It's not the X's and O's. Michigan State has altered the way they do things a little bit over the years, but we've already talked about it ad nauseum tonight. Leadership in various ways. Leader with the ball in his hands. If Hogarth's not on the court, Tyson Walker, a lot of skill, but a little bit mousy, right? No leadership. That's part of it. Rebounding strength, not great. Marble's a guy that plays a lot of minutes, not a great natural rebounder. Works at it. He's just kind of okay, but he's not Andre Hudson. He's not Antonio Smith, you know. Shooting, problems this year losing, that's Jimmy's and Joe's. The wings, we talked about that in the past. Michigan State being under 20% with Christian Brown during that 8-game stretch. That's Jimmy's and Joe's, my friend. Question number 7. Gator from Farmington Hills, Michigan. He says, football, who is your starting back 5? Who's your starting backfield in the back 5? He says his is Amir Speed, the transfer from Georgia. He's got Chuck Brantley. He's got Xavier Henderson at safety. And he has Ronald Williams and Darius Snow. So you'll notice the Gator has 3 corners on the field. Ronald Williams, Amir Speed, Chuck Brantley. He's got X at safety. He's got Snow at the nickel. So presumably he either has Snow at safety or Williams. No, he'd have to have, because he has Speed and Brantley. So he's got Williams as a safety. And I've not heard that, but I don't disagree with that being a possibility. And Snow, second or third time I've said it on this podcast, listen to your Uncle JC. Snow, linebacker? I do not know. My 5, I reserve the right to change this after spring practice. But I'll go with Amir Speed at corner. I'll go with Chuck Brantley at corner. Although, don't count out Chester Kimbrough. Had a tough game against Ohio State. Everybody has a tough game against Ohio State, as long as it's not 30 degrees outside. Xavier Henderson at safety. He can play either safety. So whoever the next best safety is, plays whatever position he's best at, and Xavier Henderson can roll out of there. He can play the strong side or the free side, either one. I'm going to guess Ronald Williams. I've not heard that, but they're just kind of low on safeties. But they must not think they're low on safeties. I'm just wondering if Ronald Williams, with his frame, if he's a safety. At the nickel, I kind of like Darius Snow there, but I kind of think it might be Angelo Gross. So I kind of waffled there a little bit. But I think Darius Snow is going to be one of the 5. I just don't know if he's a safety. I don't know. I hate to waffle, but I don't have a straight answer for you. Great question, though. Appreciate the question. All right, if you're asking me to pick 5, I'll go with Snow at nickel, although I don't think he's going to be there. I'll go with Ronald Williams at safety and Henderson at safety, and I'll go with Amir Speed and eventually Chuck Brantley at corner, but maybe they begin the season with Lowry or Kimbrough, maybe. I don't know, maybe it is Brantley and Speed at corner. I'll be interested to see what Brantley looks like after a year of conditioning and strength and nutrition under his belt. Just a slight little guy, maybe puts on some more weight and some strength. He could look like a different cat. So yeah, give me Speed and Brantley as your corners. Question number 8, Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, "Hi, Jim. Of course, I'm not a fan of anything Michigan does," he says, "but I found it interesting." By the way, let me check. Let me make sure there's no... I got to check and make sure. Yeah, I had to go on troll alert there a little bit. He says, "Hi, Jim. Of course, I'm not a fan of anything that Michigan does, but I found it interesting that Michigan basketball coaches have basically a football offensive and defensive coordinators, which makes sense in today's game. Does Izzo's staff do something like this?" He says, "It seems like our offense is getting a bit stale. I'm wondering if Izzo needs to shake up things a bit and maybe bring in some new younger blood to the staff. I'm the last person who ever wants to criticize Tom Izzo. He knows way more basketball than most of us ever will know. Make that any of us ever will know." He says, "And obviously he's earned the right to do whatever he wants, but something seems to be slipping. Curious for your thoughts." My thoughts: last year, no point guard. That was a problem. This year, the wings didn't shoot well for about 8 games, and that screwed everything up. Lack of leadership, we're talking about that. That has its impact in a lot of ways. Asking Max Christie to be defensive stopper hurt his offense and the transition game. So X's and O's, they change things here and there. You know, they're doing more Spain action on screen rolls now. They're doing more zoom action to the corner than they have in the past. They're not doing as many box sets as they used to do. So it's not like a lot of people have this idea that they're doing the same thing every single game for the last 15 years. No, they change. They gradually change. They sped up their DHOs. They are changing things. They have changed things. In terms of new blood on the staff, younger blood, why is young blood great? Wojcik had a lot to do last year, or 2 years ago, with the Big Ten championship, sweeping Michigan. Him coming in as an analyst really helped with some of the things they did in terms of defense as well, some of the game planning. And, Montgomery, they've done some new things with some of the inbound plays, and it was working better earlier in the year. Haven't seen as much of that lately. But, when the team's winning or when the team's losing, a lot of people just want to look at what they're doing and just change it because it must not be working. Yeah, make some shots and everything else will look a lot better. The staff is better now than it was the last couple of years. I'll say that. In terms of recruiting, fair point, fair question. I'll be interested to see how Montgomery recruits at Michigan State now. He recruited in the past, moved on, was head coach for about 10 years or so at Northern Illinois. He's not had a chance to go out and recruit since he's been back. Now he will this spring and summer. I'm not sure what that'll look like. Maybe it'll look good. I'm not sure. But in terms of sprucing things up, X's and O's, they do change things as they go. And that's I disagree that that's anything that needs to be tinkered with a whole lot. People need to make shots, need to get rebounds. People need to listen and get on the court for a loose ball. And they need to make first contact when rebounding. And they need some players holding other players accountable to do those things. Question number 9, Brian from Lansing. He says, with the loss last night to Michigan, are we sure that we're making the tournament, or do we have some work left to do? And if so, how much work to do? Well, if Michigan State loses out, if they lose to Ohio State and Maryland and lose in the Big Ten tournament in the first game, they're 19-13 and 10-10 in the Big Ten at worst. They'll still get in, especially with wins over Purdue, Wisconsin, and UConn. So they're in. Pete in Atlanta says, question number 10, in the game against Michigan, they continually went under the ball screen. Michigan went under the ball screen when Walker had the ball, leaving him open for the three-pointer. They defended it that way every single time from the beginning to the end of the game, and I was simply begging for Tyson Walker to pull up and shoot it. Pete in Atlanta says, why didn't he take the shot? He says, from my viewpoint, it was so obvious and simple, and that is on the coaches. If they wanted him to take it, simply making it the primary option, telling him to shoot it every time. Instead, we pass that up and try to create a shot that isn't as good as the one we just passed up, and it often leads to a turnover or a forced shot. Would like my thoughts, and I'd like to hear the question asked in one of Izzo's briefings. There's not going to be any briefings this week because they're playing a midweek game, but if you're near the bench a lot of times with Izzo, he gets mad at players for not shooting. He famously used to get mad at Jason Klein for not shooting. Those guys have green lights. Tyson Walker has a green light. Izzo didn't mention it after the game last night. Tyson Walker was asked about it, and Tyson kind of bristled at the question a little bit and said, I took more shots than I usually do. Tyson didn't see it that way. I don't know, but I agree with you 100%. He was passing up those shots. And they need the best version of Tyson Walker. They need Tyson Walker to do Tyson Walker things. And you saw it in the Illinois game. That's what's so strange, that he kind of passed that up in this game. Speaking of which, let's go to the film room. All right, I'm gonna have to ask you guys. Can you hear me again? I don't know if that was if you can hear me now or not. I apologize about that, but I was gonna go over some of the problems that were happening with ball screen defense. I'll wait to hear back from your comments here in the comments section, and let me know if you can hear me at this point. Can you hear me here or not? I got one thumbs up. Can see it, but it was working slow. We had that in slow motion, MSU Hunter. We had it in slow motion because there's a copyright problem if you do it. And so Adam's saying that you can hear me now. Well, that is certainly disappointing that I ran that film room and you couldn't hear me. Why in the heck is that the situation? I'll go. Okay, I just went to that film. Mini Studio was on. I did see a muted thing come up. I'm going to go back to it one more time to see if the muted thing comes. All right. When I clicked on the film room, it says Mini Studio is muted, and I'm not sure why that is, and I'm not going to spend time trying to get that straightened out. But I'm 0 for 2 on this now. I put time into the film room to go over X's and O's and show some of the things that went wrong. Last time the video froze up and you could hear me. This time the video is working, but you can't hear me. And I'm angry about that. Anyway, there was some of the ball screen defense. I'll just tell you what it was. There's 3 or 4 plays. Jaden Akins was, I think it made it like 23-11 or so. During Michigan's run in the first half, Jaden Akins was supposed to go under Bingham. Bingham was jamming up into Dickinson on a handoff. He's supposed to go this way. Instead, Akins went over it, so Eli Brooks had a straight route to a layup. Later on, it was Walker and Hauser. Same error. And it was like, we worked on this stuff. Why are we doing it wrong now? And then there was a couple times, one time in transition, Hogarth didn't stop ball in transition. I think that's just him being a court low. And there was a time when Tyson Walker got out on a shooter and went for a ball fake and gave up a drive, dish, three-pointer. One time Max Christie up on a ball fake against Eli Brooks, drive, dish, three-pointer. Izzo doesn't want his guards out trying to block a shot 25 feet from the basket. You might see Izzo sometimes on the sideline saying, stay solid, stay solid. So sometimes they'll get shots over the top, the opponent will. Sometimes they get hot. But percentages over the course of time, Izzo will take that more of a pack line defense mindset. Don't give up the drive. Don't need Max Christie blocking a shot from three-point range, because over the course of time, you're going to get extended too many times and give up what they gave up last night, dribble penetration. So Izzo was talking about stopping dribble penetration. He said was the number one item on the list for the game, and it's the thing they did the poorest. So that's why Izzo, among other things, was just like, what is with these guys? He said it, going back 5 or 6 games, that for some reason these players are not adhering to the things that he is emphasizing. And we saw it happen again last night. So I'm angry that the film room didn't work. Well, crap, I thought I had it changed there for a minute. Anyway, I think you can hear me again. Let me know if you can't hear. What do we have here? Some of the comments. Okay. It looks like E-Money Jameis Bowman said not to do it in the first place. Seriously, I thought that some of the film room stuff, some people like that, some people don't. But I could get a better idea of whether people want it or not if I could get the darn thing to work. Crap. Apologize about that. Anyway, let's go back here to the I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll throw the number out here. I don't think we've had any trolls yet tonight, have we? I'll put the phone number out here. 616-439-1158. We'll go with that. Let's go back to the mailbag. Question number 11, Ben from Spring Arbor, Michigan. He says, who reaches the national semifinals first, men's basketball or men's football? Well, there's no women's football. Men's basketball or football? Who reaches the national semifinals first? Well, let's open that question up to the chat area. You guys tell me who you think is going to the Final Four next, MSU football or MSU basketball. I'm going to say basketball just based on history. I know you can't really see it from here, but I'll go with Izzo. Nothing against Tucker, but I need to see that one to believe it a little bit more. Question number 12, Macklin JB from Rochester, Michigan. He says the staff has done an amazing job of addressing football needs using the portal over the last 2 seasons. But based on who's returning on the offensive line, it seems to be the best question, at best, a question mark, he says. Macklin JB from Rochester says, I realize Green is on campus right now. Brian Green from Washington State. And they have one more spot to fill if he commits. But how uneasy should we feel about the offensive line for this upcoming season? That's a question from Macklin JB from Rochester. Offensive line, well, Jared Horst is back. Looks like things are going okay in that regard. He's at left tackle. Got J.D. Duplain at left guard, proven player. Matt Carrick at right guard, injured last year, was a backup player last year. And while he was a backup player, he graded out really well. The year before that, he started and was just okay. But I think Carrick is a solid, serviceable, proven right guard. We'll see what he looks like this spring, but I would anticipate him having a little more man strength. I think Carrick should be okay. Spencer Brown at right tackle. That's the good thing about the little drama they had at right tackle last year when Jared Horst, or for the last game of the year last season in the bowl game when Jared Horst all of a sudden was unavailable. Well, Jared Horst was unavailable for the last month of the season. But with A.J. Arcuri, was it Arcuri that was not available at the end of the season? Anyway, Spencer Brown started against Pittsburgh in the Peach Bowl and played pretty well against an excellent pass rush. Spencer Brown was solid. See a redshirt sophomore last year? That's fine. Redshirt sophomore gets a start against that defense, does well. That's what you want. I think Spencer Brown done okay. He's proven something to me. I thought he was a 3-star project. I thought he didn't quite deserve 4 stars as a recruit, although he was a 4-star recruit. I thought he was a 3-star project. He's been a project. Now he's on pace to proving me wrong, possibly. But I like the way Spencer Brown looks. I think that he is his play is escalating. We'll see what he looks like this spring. But I think right tackle with Spencer Brown should be okay. Horst should be okay. Carrick can do playing okay. Nick Samak at center or Brian Green at center. And whoever loses that job could be a second-string guard potentially. As far as other guards go, you got Kevin Wigington, Gino Vandermark in there somewhere. Be checking those guys out this spring. Brandon Baldwin is on schedule to be an offensive tackle. Ethan Boyd seems to be on schedule. Again, be talking a little bit with some coaches. We will have our ear to the ground when practice starts March 15th. And as they get pads on, getting to March 20th or so, and we'll find out a little bit more about how spring practice is looking at that offensive line. But I would not be wringing my hands maybe as much as you are. You seem very concerned. But it's a question of player development. Question number 13, Fish On says, Jim, I've never posted a question, so this is the first time I've posted. He says, how many games do the Spartans win next fall? Talking about Michigan State football. How many games do the Spartans win? I don't know, 8, Question number 14, Spefton from East Lansing says, in his presser, Phil Martelli talked about an offensive coordinator creating their game plan against us and also alluded to specific duties of other assistants. Do we do a similar arrangement? Do we have a similar arrangement? If so, can you explain what each of our assistant basketball coaches is responsible for? I've read here that Dwayne Stevens is in charge of substitutions, but that's about the only specific that I know. Curious to know what responsibility each assistant has. Yeah, Stevens is in charge of player rotations and keeping an eye on who's played how many minutes, making sure guys get in and foul trouble and all those things so that, Izzo can look more at X's and O's things and other things. Doug Wojcik has a lot to do with inbound offense and inbound defense also. As far as defense, they rotate the defense, which is the scouting report. Like for Ohio State, a certain coach would have the scout for that team. That's the way it was in the past. Like Dwayne Stevens would have the scout for Ohio State. Dane Fife would have the scout for Maryland and so forth. I know Dane Fife's not there anymore. That's the way it used to be. Pretty sure that's the way it is now. So I think they rotate who's in charge of specific games so that one coach is not doing the scout every single time. They want to keep it fresh. You could have a coordinator. Izzo's looked into that. When Izzo was building this program, he emulated football in a lot of ways on a lot of things, including scripting of plays. Nobody was doing that in basketball. He borrowed that from Bill Walsh, football. So the coordinator thing, Izzo's looked into that. I think Larry Bird in the NBA was one of the first to have an offensive and defensive coordinators when he was with the Pacers. Didn't turn out that well, but he's the first one that I've heard do that. Now, Beeline used to do defensive coordinator with that guy that was, I forget his name now. He used to coach at Wyoming, I think. And that's when Beeline started turning it around when he delegated defense to one coach. Izzo is an all-encompassing guy. He's offense and defense. So he has coaches looking at it, and he's kind of overseeing some general stuff. And then in practice, he will get in and micromanage something that doesn't look exactly right or something that needs to be a certain way. So at practice, I see Izzo doing corrections on offense and defense. And he's a Hall of Famer. In terms of self-scouting, like looking at Michigan State, what is Michigan State doing and what are the opponents seeing? That's self-scout. And you relay that back to Izzo and everybody else, like, hey, we've run this inbound play 5 straight times, or we've done this, whatever. We need to mix it up and do this and hit some tangents with that. Self-scout. Mike Garland has done that in the past. Is he doing it now? I'm not really sure. Good question. Let's go back over here to the chat area, and we'll wrap this thing up. I got to go back and find my place. Brian V says, all right, wait a minute. Go back to Old Tuck. Old Tuck says, rarely do you see an Izzo team regress or not improve throughout the year. They are stalled out, if not regressing. I agree, Old Tuck. They are regressing, and it's rare. Kelly Spartan said it earlier that Draymond Green's junior year, which is Kalen Lucas's senior year, that was the year Corey Lucius was kicked off the team halfway through the year. Darrell Summers kind of fogged out. That was one year where things really became dysfunctional and they regressed as the year went along. It's rare, but that's what's happened so far this year. And with that Purdue win, with the way they changed some things, I had reason to believe there was still hope that they could gain some traction, not just because they beat Purdue, but how they beat Purdue. They got some perimeter shooting, and they changed up the defensive stopper role, changed up some minutes with some guys, Hogard playing more, Hogard and Walker sharing the backcourt more. And I'm like, well, that's a reshuffling of things. That's a reinvention a little bit. It's subtle. If you don't watch things real closely, you wouldn't have noticed. The people watching this probably noticed. But it was a reinvention in some ways. And I thought that had some potential, and I was looking forward to seeing it in action last night at Michigan, but Hogard was not really available, so that all fizzled out. But you're right, they were regressing, hence the need to reshuffle some things. We'll see how it goes from here, but they cannot be good unless they get the early December version of Bingham back. And I don't know if that can be recovered. Bingham playing 9-10 minutes right now. They need Marcus Bingham And I don't know if that ship has sailed, but you need that guy. He's your best rebounder, shot blocker. Everybody knows that. I thought he was great on ball screen defense earlier in the year. He's been getting pounded this year because he's gave up a couple of key putbacks in that Penn State game. And just some of the things Izzo is emphasizing, getting on the ball, getting on the ground for loose balls, and just some of the hustle items. Some of the, I mentioned earlier about how he overplayed Diabate to the left, got beat to the right, and why is he out there at three-point range against that guy anyway? It's not like he shoots like Nowitzki, Diabate talking about. So the messaging is not getting through to Bingham, and that bothers Izzo, and that'll get you a seat on the bench. But somehow, some way, they need the best version of Bingham. Marble's good too, but maybe those guys play 20 minutes apiece. Right now, it's 25, 5, and 10. Well, it's like 23, 5, and 10, and then 3 minutes with Hauser and Malik Hall playing together. All right, Brian V says, I don't think any of these players want the ball. That's the problem. Fair point, with the exception of the end of the Purdue game when Tyson Walker, the one time this year, including the Illinois game when he called his own number and he wanted that shot, won the game. But you're right, if he didn't take that shot, and if Hoggard hadn't been hurt, remember Hoggard was hurt for the last minute of that game, last 3-4 minutes. If Hoggard's in the game, who's taking that shot? I'm not sure. Hoggard's hurt. Tyson Walker, for whatever reason, went into a different Tyson Walker mode and said, I was taking that shot. I was taking that shot. Like I said earlier, that's the Tyson Walker they need, especially against that poor Michigan ball screen defense last night. Didn't take those shots. Brian V says, I get tired of seeing Walker pass up shots. Shoot the ball, Brian V says. I agree. I think Izzo agrees with you also. And it seems like that should be the easiest thing a coach should have to do is telling a guy, you've got the green light, shoot it. But you'd be surprised how many times guys just don't. I saw Hauser in the game against Illinois. They ran a play for him. It's when they had Hauser and Hall on the court at the same time. They're going small. So if they're small and he's out there, and I think Coburn was guarding him, and he's out there to take the open shot because Coburn's not going to come out that far on him because Coburn's 7'1". He can't move his feet. So they've set up a play for Hauser to take advantage of that offensive mismatch at that end. He's wide open. He doesn't take the shot. And I saw Hauser and pass it. Like he knows he was supposed to shoot it. He still didn't shoot it. Hauser doesn't have that problem much anymore. He's been shooting when he's open and shooting at a nice productive clip. But that's just an example. All right. Brian V says, Christie looks tired. I think he's fading. He needs another summer of the weight room. Then he'll really be something special. All the talent in the world. I would agree with that. Good post. Old Tuck says, Malik Hall is not Nigel Hayes. He relies heavily on one-on-one moves out of offensive flow to score. A good player and nothing more. He does try to get into some of those spin, dribble, fall away stuff, but I do think Malik Hall does have some, pick and pop, face up Kenny Goins game also. Haven't seen as much of that lately. Tyler Miller says, what happened to Izzo's concept of using football pads in practice? Does he still coach in that style or not? That is not legal anymore, from what I understand. That is illegal. Brian V says, Akins could be the stopper. He needs more minutes. Yeah, he could be. And if down the road, like next year, Hoggard and Akins can give you the beginnings of a real good defensive backcourt along with Christie. That could be a real good defensive backcourt. Akins made a couple shots last night, a couple three-pointers, helped Michigan State pull within 11. Need more minutes. That's a good point. Akins has made some shots. He made 2 3-pointers against Wisconsin that were key. But I'll say this, Akins is not actually that good of a shooter. Christie's a really good shooter, but you don't see it in games. So maybe Akins is an 8 o'clock shooter. Some guys are 3 p.m. shooters. Shoot real well in practice. They don't shoot well at 8 p.m. Maybe Akins is an 8 p.m. shooter. So maybe it's time for him to get more minutes. If Akins gets more minutes, who do you want to get fewer minutes? You can answer that question for me. Jan Elke says, go green. Spartan Marinelli 87 says, tough to watch us when we don't give the effort. Again, Izzo might not disagree with that either. Brian V says, Christie probably needs more rest, as I've said. He just looks worn out. Okay. So Brian V says, play Akins more minutes instead of Christie. Now, Akins made some errors last night in terms of ball screen defensive assignments. but I don't think that's going to be a recurring problem. But points well taken. Thanks for posting. Derek Wells Spiegel says, only reason why Michigan's doing good is because Juwan Howard is not coaching them. I could see him winning out, and then when they come back, he coaches and loses the first game. I would tend to disagree with that. I do think Martelli's done a good job, but I think when Howard comes back, Howard oversees things, and he orchestrated things, and he has his input, obviously, on things. He'll come back, and they will get a charge out of him. I think they will get a lift when he comes back, and I think Michigan's got as good a chance as anybody to win the Big Ten tournament. MSU Hunter Spartan says, checking in from Wisconsin, ecstasy to agony in the last 2 games. Team looked tired and listless. Bingham and Brown have gone south. No leadership, no fury, just sad. Rackham, can't disagree with any of that. Shifty Eyes says, thanks for doing another show, Jim. My favorite content on YouTube, sir. Thank you, Shifty Eyes. Appreciate that. Tyler Miller says, on the football side, is that kid from Georgetown, the offensive line, still interested in us, or is that ship sailed? I think that ship has sailed. He's going to Virginia. Gordon Tinona's got that. He committed elsewhere. MSU Hunter Spartan says, Greg Gard should be Big Ten Coach of the Year. No one thought Wisconsin was a title threat. Johnny Davis went from sub to stud. Spartans might get 8-9 seed, might win a game, and be done. 17-4 to 19-10. Don't disagree with any of that. Greg Gard pulling a Gene Katie this year. Those of you that are old enough to remember, Purdue would have a good team. They'd lose all their players. They'd be picked to finish 5th or 6th or 7th in the old Big Ten. Boom, he'd win the Big Ten again. Bo Ryan used to do something like that too. Johnny Davis, great job, but nobody knew Johnny Davis was going to be this Johnny Davis. So that's why everybody picked against Wisconsin. Amazing development from that young man. Joe Clearwater says, does Tom Izzo have some big recruits coming in next year? Well, we talked about Kohler. He's a skilled big man from out west. Like I said, a little bit of like a Suton Zach Randolph combination. I know that's a freaky combination, but that's kind of, he's got some inside game. Not as physical as Zach, and he's skilled. He's tricky. He'll have some. And he's got some ruggedness to him, but he's got to make sure he can play hard and deal with the men of college basketball. There will be a transition, so don't expect him to come in and be, an All-American or anything, but he's got some skill. He's a different type of guy. And Trey Holloman is a lead guard from Minnesota, football player, was a 3.5-star football recruit, and tough point guard, good passer, a lot of flair with his passing ability. I'll have to wait and see at this level whether he can just hit singles, because you need guys to hit singles. That's what Hogarth does real well as a passer, hit singles. A lot of times Michigan State turns the ball over, and Izzo says, don't be trying to hit home runs and triples. Just hit singles. Hogarth hits singles with perfection a lot of times. This guy passes with some flair, Holloman does. Toughness, football player. Can he be a leader? I'm not sure, but they could use that. I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I've not watched him enough. Because the camp circuit the last 2 years just hasn't been available. I wanted to see him once last year, like I said earlier in the show, and he was off Broadway at a different gym, and then by the time I went to see him, they were out of the tournament. That was at Spiece, I think. Same thing with Braylon Green also, the kid from Ypsilanti. Actually, he's not from Ypsilanti. I think I posted once that he's from Ypsilanti, and he made it clear on Twitter that he's not from Ypsilanti. But he's playing out in Arizona now. Joe Clearwater says, how would a Michigan State-Illinois matchup go if they ran it back? Michigan State has played these big guys like Edey and Dickinson and Coburn. All three of those teams don't show real hard on the ball screens. All three of those guys pounded inside. Michigan State double-teamed against Illinois, right? A little bit more. And Illinois surrounds you with 4 shooters, though. So, Michigan State would do the same thing. They'd single cover down low and try not to just gift 3-pointers. and just try to survive, and they try to run him. Worked against Purdue. I don't know. Probably wouldn't be a whole lot different than the game that was at Breslin. But on a neutral site, give Illinois another touchdown. MSU Hunter says, no, only 2 players signed and 4-star point guard and power forward. That's what I was talking about a minute ago. MSU Hunter says Spartans have been out-rebounded in half their Big Ten games. That's amazing. I mean, we're talking about a lot of other things, leadership, three-point shooting, slumps, and other problems, but it's a long list of problems for Michigan State, and rebounding is among them. Turnovers were a problem for a long time, right? But rebounding hasn't even really come up much in the post-game press conferences, and that is what Michigan State's been known for. That might be the biggest failure to this point. Joe Clearwater says, who's the tallest, biggest guy underneath? He says, I'm from Paris, Illinois. I'm a Big Ten fan. The tallest, biggest guy underneath is Marcus Bingham at about 7 feet with a 7'4" wingspan, but he's in the doghouse. He's only playing about 10 minutes a game right now. Mr. Bowman says, you guys remember when Tom would say Mateen, Chris Hill, and others would have bad shooting nights? They would wake up the student managers during the night, open up the gym, and put up shots. You never hear about this team doing extra things or staying late working on their game. You might not hear about it, but apparently Max Christie and Gabe Brown do it more than anybody. And I've seen Max Christie come in to do extra shots. Like earlier in the year when he was slumping, there was practice, then there was interviews, and I was in the auxiliary gym, and I had my laptop there, and I stayed like an extra hour working on things. Christie came back down, and he said, excuse me, sir, do you mind if I put some music on? I'm going to practice shooting. I'm like, dude, this is your house. You do whatever you want. And I've seen him work on his shooting extra. And Izzo says those are the 2 guys that work the most. And when they were slumping, that's why Izzo stuck with them. He says, if guys are slumping but they're working on their game, I'm betting on the rise. So those guys do it. Do enough of them do it? Are enough of them watching enough film? It's a good question. Is there, Izzo also used to talk about the leaders would bring others with them. They would bring others with them to do extra shooting. They'd bring others with them to the film room. Is that going on? Not hearing much about that either. E Money J says, MSU basketball, we should win our last 2 games. That's very optimistic. It's possible. Ohio State is certainly stumbling. But anyone who thinks they can predict what Michigan State's going to play like in the next game, you're a better man than I am. Infinity says Chuck Brantley with some conditioned weight will be a force. So, Brantley played a lot this year. Talking about football now. Brantley played at corner. Thin little dude. Hits hard. Actually hurt himself. And played a little bit hurt, and then hurt himself even more against Ohio State. Out for the year. I think it was Ohio State. And, no, maybe it was Purdue game. Maybe it's Purdue. Anyway, he'll hit you. He's got to show that he's, with that little frame, that he's not brittle and injury prone. Got to show that. But he can run, he can cover, he can hit. Just a teenager. As he becomes more physically mature, nutrition, weight room, I tend to agree. He came in as a 4-star, and he was the guy in that recruiting class that I said I thought had the best chance to make an immediate impact. I don't have a great track record of predicting immediate impact success. My forecasts on those, not always real great. Long term, a little better, but in the initial, not so great. But that was one guy that I said, yeah, when you looked at his film, he's a 4-star because he hit like crazy in high school. You knew he would try to hit in college, but would he continue to hit? Yes, he has. So we'll see Brantley this spring. Mr. Bowman says we need some thugs, some dogs on this team that don't take any stuff from no one. I'd agree with that. $10 Tommy says, Comp, give us some hope for the rest of the year. Talking about basketball? Well, I go back to the Purdue game, and I talked about that earlier. Give me a healthy Hogard, defensive stopper, playing well enough to earn and deserve 30 minutes, because that's what a stopper needs to play. That doesn't mean Tyson Walker only plays 10. It means he gets 20. So those guys are on the court for 10 minutes a game. Hogard finding Tyson Walker in transition at the wings. I think that's an element of this game we've only seen briefly this year. That's an element of this team we've only seen briefly. So that part can get sprung on an opponent in tournament time, but they've got to work on it to make sure that they work out some bugs with it. But that part of it, that's a slight, subtle reinvention, and I'm not sure how good that can look. It might look pretty good. And if Hogard is the defensive stopper, Christie against most opponents doesn't have to spend as much time physically or mentally guarding the other team's best team. That can make Christie become a better shooter, better offensive player, better in transition. Gabe Brown has shot well lately. Last week, was it before the Purdue game? I saw him shoot well in practice, but I couldn't come out and say it on the message board. But I did soften up my earlier stance about the possibility of them going away from Gabe Brown a little bit. Then I saw him in practice, and I saw the time they were putting into him, and it was obvious that they were putting renewed investment of minutes in him in practice. And his shot, Garland was working with his shot, and he was shot well in practice. And I'm like, forget what I said. They're going to stick with him. And he has shot pretty well since then. So Gabe Brown just needs to get back to being that Gabe Brown. Malik Hall needs to come back off the milk carton. And Bingham can't quit on Bingham. I mean, is there a chance he could come back resurrected like Brandon Dawson? Brandon Dawson was benched a few times, came back. Darrell Summers was benched a few times, came back in that run to the Final Four in 2009 as a junior. Or as a sophomore. That was 2010 as a junior. So I'm not going to close the door on Bingham. I don't know what Izzo thinks about him. It'd be really interesting. I don't think did Izzo have his did Izzo have his radio show tonight? I heard he didn't have his radio show on Monday because it was the night before the Michigan game. I thought I heard earlier in the week he was going to have it on Wednesday, which would mean they were doing it from Columbus tonight. I don't know. I'm going to go check that out because I'll have to look to see if that's available anywhere. Maybe not. Because I'll be interested to hear what he says about anyone or anything. Bingham, in doghouse, 10 minutes last night. He's capable of giving more. Had a nice jump hook along the right baseline. In these games when he's been doghoused, he's hit a nice field goal somewhere in there. Then he makes a mistake, then another one, then he's done. Izzo trying to get the point clear to him. I don't think Izzo gives up on him, so is Izzo trying to get through to him to come through at the end. One last chance to make it real, as Springsteen would say. Can he get that with Bingham? I'm not closing the door on that. Hauser's rounded into a solid player. Defense, not a liability. Rebounding, grades out well. Gets in there and grinds it up a little bit. Not the biggest, strongest guy, but not terrible in rebounding. Not a plus rebounder, but not terrible. He's had a couple of nice rebounding games. And he hits shots when they come available to him. He doesn't go chucking. When the offense comes to him, he delivers. And when he goes into a game, they run plays for him. Last night he checks in 3 minutes into the game, and they run. He set a down screen, and then they screened for him. He popped out, hit a three. Went up 11-10 on that. They go right to him. They've got a set of scripted plays they go to. So that's nice when you can go to the bench, go to him as a shooter. That's not a bad thing to have. Man, all those individuals, like I said, they've all had moments. Bring Hogard back. Get him healthy. Defensive stopper. Running the show. Tyson Walker, get him back to being an off guard, a secondary guard, a combo guard. Last night he had too much on his plate. Turned down some shots. Tried to push it on the dribbles. Spent some energy there. Ended up getting tired himself because he didn't have Hogard to switch out minutes with. Hurt his knee on that one collision, so Christie had to come in and play point guard, but I agree with what Rod said on our message board that Walker scored 11 points or 9 points. That's nice, but it was like the most passive 9 or 11 points you'll ever see out of somebody. So $10 Tom says, Tom, comp, give us some hope for the rest of the year. That's the hope, is that all the individuals have done it at some point, but they're running out of time to get it all ironed out, and it certainly has been all ironed out infrequently this year. Izzo is... like I said last night after the game, he was quiet. That was as quiet as I've seen him in a post-game press conference, maybe. So, Is he thinking he's not going to get through? He'll never give up. He'll never surrender and say, I can't get through to these guys. But I know he's getting frustrated by it. But I also think that he believes there's a good team in there somewhere. It was the 05 team that was beaten by double digits by Iowa in the Big Ten tournament when Izzo took out the VCR tapes and smashed them with a hammer. Sledgehammer, I think it was. And said he didn't even want to look at the film. And fighting back tears, he said, I believe in you guys. You guys can get it done. Izzo's going to need one of those moments to get through to these guys. I'm sure he's thinking of something, but it's gonna take more than theatrics, of course. But if Bingham gets a breakthrough and Izzo and the teammates rally to him, then everybody can rise up. Like when Matty Sissoko had that, ripped that rebound and drew a foul, offensive rebound against Purdue, and Gabe Brown was punching him on the ground, all fired up. That lifted the entire team rallying around Sissoko. If Bingham can have a moment like that, it can spark a lot. And I'm not giving up on that yet. I don't think the entire script has been written. All right, so now we're getting to the part where I messed up the live thing, and people tell me not to do a live thing anyway. And one guy saying, hey, I like the live thing, and everybody else saying, no, don't do the live thing. All right, Edward Hayward with a personal sponsorship. We really appreciate that, Edwin. Where's he at? Right there he is. Edwin. Thank you, Edwin. Appreciate that. Thank you. Edwin Haywood says, video game controller poses triumphantly in between the words critical hit. So I think that was some sort of I don't know what that is, but we'll take it. MSU Hunter says the last two seasons results from Izzo's lack of recruiting. You can't turn pasture ponies into thoroughbreds. It's a good point about recruiting. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Jimmys and Joes, it does get back to the players who are those Jimmys and Joes, and how you accumulate players is recruiting, of course. I'll say in terms of recruiting, a lot of people wondering about recruiting, and it just turns out to be, guys not panning out, because in terms of recruiting rankings, this year's team is not much different than some of his other teams. I went back and looked up the 2015 Final Four and the 2019 Final Four teams. And their recruits were about like Michigan State's. I mean, Michigan State right now got Max Christie as a freshman as a top 30 recruit. Marcus Bingham was number 61 in the country. Malik Hall was number 50. A.J. Hogard was 75. Gabe Brown was a 101. Joey Hauser was a top 60. You throw in Tyson Walker as a portal guy, as a low major guy transferred in. Mady Sissoko was number 50. Julius Marble was unranked. Jay Nakins, and your freshman, Jay Nakins is 48. Pierre Brooks, 69. Foster Lawyer no longer with the team. He was 65. But in terms of recruiting, he was part of it. Thomas Kithier's like 110 or something. All right. So that's what it is. I just gave you those numbers for a general idea of where they were ranked. Go back to the 2019 Final Four. He went to a Final Four with these recruits. Cassius Winston was 29. Josh Langford was 20, but he wasn't on that team. He wasn't playing. So they had Cassius Winston as a 29. Nick Ward, 41. Aaron Henry, 115. Xavier Tillman, 86. Then you throw in a walk-on. Kenny Goins helped a lot. The freshmen, the younger guys in 2019, Foster Lawyer, Gabe Brown, Thomas Kithier, Marcus Bingham, all these guys that could have been part of the current thing in terms of recruiting. But in terms of, the aggregate recruiting strength, it's really no different than the 2019 group. 2019, different in that they had a supreme guy with the ball in his hands. 2015 Final Four team recruits as a senior, Brandon Dawson, number 20 in the country. Tum Tum, number 62 in the country. Denzel, 81. Matt Costello, 83. Gavin Schilling, number 125 recruit in the country. Javon Bess, number 119 recruit in the country. Alvin Ellis, not in the top 150. Travis Trice, not in the top 150. Also on that team, Marvin Clark, number 146. Then you had Bryn Forbes coming in as a transfer. Difference there, you had some imposing physicality in Brandon Dawson. and you had supreme leadership from Denzel Valentine. Trice had a lot of heart, and Bryn Forbes was an NBA shooter. But in terms of recruiting, I mean, recruiting and transfer like Forbes, is that part of it? Yeah, it's roster management. But I reject the notion that Michigan State has been recruiting more poorly than they did the recruitments heading into the 2015 Final Four and the 2019 Final Four, period. Now, in 2015, they had Matt Costello. I mean, you'd like to have Marcus Bingham. You'd like to recruit that guy and have him have more strength and a little more skill, and he turns into Adrian Payne. You'd like for, Thomas Kithier to have been 2 inches taller, a little bit stronger, and be Matt Costello. And it took Costello a couple years before he really started gaining traction. But there's not a lot of 6'10 guys out there. Really, there's not. They're good recruits. But my point is, you can't just mail order these people. You can't just say, yeah, give me another Adrian Payne and another Costello and a Cassius Winston. It's hard to find those guys. And it's hard to do it for 25 straight years. I talked about that in the podcast last week with Conan Dyke. You're changing your roster every year in the cyclical nature of college basketball. And that's why it's so rare to have someone like Michigan State to go to the NCAA tournament, 25 straight years. Second longest streak in the history of the game. I mentioned Duke and Kentucky didn't make the tournament last year. It's hard to do it every single year. So sometimes when you recruit a Marcus Bingham, he doesn't turn into Adrian Payne. And it's a difficult deal. But let me say this, as we wrap up, I see a lot of I've heard from a lot of Michigan State fans out there. Maybe I should have led with this. And those of you that are still watching, I'm glad you're still here. Maybe you're listening. It's getting to be late, but let me say this. I might say this again next week. I've seen some people talk about, Michigan State, and it's no joy to watch this team. And, I've heard people say they're done with this team. They're not watching college basketball. Done with this team. Done with this team. Your team is going to the NCAA tournament. If you're an old dude like me, you remember when Michigan State many years did not go to the NCAA tournament. You remember years like in 1985, 86, when they went to the tournament, it was a big deal. Or when they played Seton Hall in the first round in, 1991. It's a big deal. They're in the NCAA tournament, and they won their first game. Then they lost to Grant Hill in the second round. But they were in the tournament, and they won a game. That was a success. They're in the tournament. Michigan State fans demanding, rightfully so. Not all of you, but some of you, too spoiled, too entitled? Yes. Not a bad thing. That's part of the elite package, I guess. They're in the NCAA tournament. And people saying they're done with the team? Is that what a blue blood program does? I don't know. Crowd showed up really well against Purdue at home, no question about it. Losing some games, done with the team? Louisville has not won an NCAA tournament game since 2017. Blue blood has not won an NCAA tournament game since 2017. That was the same weekend that Michigan State beat the Miami Hurricanes and then lost to Kansas in the second round when Miles Bridges was a freshman. That's the last time Louisville won an NCAA tournament team. North Carolina State has great fans, great tradition. If you've been down there, you know it. NC State has serious fans. And that's a program that, until the last 20 years, had really good tradition. North Carolina State has been to the NCAA tournament once in the last 6 years. NC State. NC State has won one NCAA tournament game in the last 9 years. North Carolina State, one win in the NCAA tournament in 9 damn years. NC State, and they have great fans. Maryland, they've been to the Sweet 16 once since 2003. One Sweet 16 in 18 years. Maryland. And they've got great fans. I'm not saying that they get hot under the collar too. Purdue, they've been to one Final Four in the last 52 years. Purdue, they've got great fans, knowledgeable fans. NC State has great fans, knowledgeable fans. Louisville has great fans, knowledgeable fans. Purdue, maybe the best fans in the Big Ten. They've not been to the Final Four in 42 damn years. Purdue. Indiana has not been to the Elite Eight in 20 damn years. Indiana, 20 years, no Elite Eights. Indiana's had one Elite Eight in 28 damn years. Indiana's won one NCAA tournament game since 2013. Indiana's won one NCAA tournament game in 8 years. And I'm not even going to go into Georgetown and St. John's. Their era is over. I'm talking about Purdue, North Carolina State, Maryland, Louisville, Indiana, and the droughts they've had with rabid fan bases. And you're going to tell me that you're tired of this team when you're assured of an NCAA tournament? Tom Izzo doesn't deserve that.